Diamond here with you on BBC Radio Berkshire. The modern world is often a stressful place with anxiety and pressures coming from all sides. Sometimes, though, the best way to deal with it is a simple change of mindset. And that's where my next guest comes in. She's a hypnotherapist, although I think she doesn't like being called a hypnotherapist, so we'll go there in a minute. From Henley, and she's even worked with the celebrity chef Jamie Oliver's apprentices in his 15 restaurants. She's Fiona Nicolson. Are you Fee?
Yes, sometimes.
When you came in, I thought you said I'm Fee, and I thought,
answer to anything really.
Now, you don't like being called a hypnotherapist?
I'm slightly different from a traditional hypnotherapist, so I'm a cognitive hypnotherapist, which makes a very slight difference.
Okay, well, it sounds even more complicated to me. You have to explain. Well, if we're not using either of those two words, how would you explain to me what it is that you do then? I
work with a range of clients to help free them from the learnt behaviours, the problem patterns, issues that are holding them back in some way in life. So I work with them to free them from that so they can be different in their lives. They can have a different style of life if that's what they want to do, and they can reach their full potential.
It's interesting, that word cognitive, because I've heard it before, obviously, with cognitive behavioural therapy.
Absolutely.
And I know that is about changing the way we perceive things.
Yes,
basically.
Totally. You're absolutely
You take
right.
somebody who may be, I don't know, incredibly worried about money all the time.
Yeah.
And then you teach them that actually they built up fear and money worries into like this enormous, horrible monster that's always at their shoulder.
Yes.
If you can think of your money worries in a different way, it's not the monster that you always thought it was.
Exactly.
Is that right? Am I going down the right lane
You
here?
are. And to take it even almost a step further, for example, I have worked with clients who have come to me extremely concerned about money. And actually, when we've worked, it's dated back to a fear of homelessness, a fear of not having choices in life that has been instilled in them for different reasons from childhood. Once we've cleared that, once we've worked to change that, they perceive, you're absolutely right, their perception has changed of their money worries, and they can approach it in a different way and feel far more comfortable about it.
I suppose the difference in thinking, it just shows how powerful the difference in thinking is. Because sometimes you hear of somebody who's thrown themselves off a bridge because of money worries. And you think, well, why would you commit suicide because of money worries? Because what's the worst that could ever happen to you if you've got no money? Yes, you'd be homeless. Yes, you'd have to be on the welfare state. Yes, you'd have to go to charities and for help. But you're still alive and you've still got your health and things like that. Why would you let money become that big a problem in your life? And the answer, I suppose, is because the person who does commit suicide for that sort of reason has lost perspective.
Yes. There also can be, in that kind of extreme scenario, there can be mental health issues underlying, then an overlay of what I might call learnt behaviour. And the combination of the two things has driven that person into that very extreme behaviour.
But it is, at the end of the day, it's the way they perceive things being that bad.
Yes.
Whereas an outsider would say, I've looked at your life and it's not that bad.
I think everybody has very different experiences in life. And even if they were to have the same experiences, they would perceive them and interpret them differently. So everybody's view of life, their own lives, are very different to the next person. So you can almost get twins who go through almost identical surroundings, environment, interactions with people, with parents, etc. And yet they can perceive life differently.
Can it be taught then? I mean, clearly that's what you try and do, but I just wonder if you can take somebody and teach them how to think on a different level, how to think differently about what they're going through.
It's actually about unteaching them. So I think it's interesting to remember that up to 90% of all our behaviour is governed by the unconscious, which is really quite scary in the first instance. Exactly.
Because
who's driving the bus?
Yes, exactly. I'm not really in control.
Yeah. And the primary role of the unconscious is to keep us safe. It's to keep us away from perceived danger and towards security. It's a survival mechanism. We have to remember we're still programmed from caveman days. So in effect, we're still looking for the saber-toothed tiger. We're not yet caught up to a modern world. And as people go through life, as they grow up, as they go through different experiences, and people tell them things about themselves, about the world, they draw conclusions. And people can draw conclusions that, based on their experiences, I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable, all these fundamental things. And this can then manifest in a multitude of different behaviours. For some people, they might be anxious. Other people, it's a lack of confidence and being held back by that. Anger management, eating too much, eating disorders, etc. So what I'm doing when I work with a client, rather than teaching them new behaviour, I'm actually working with them to pinpoint and actively change and find that root cause. And once we've changed that, so that they no longer believe they're not good enough, or whatever it is for them as an individual, things feel differently. They perceive things differently. So rather than teaching them, we're almost going back and unpicking.
Trying to unpick what caused the problem in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
How
fascinating.
did you get to work with Jamie Oliver's 15?
My husband was involved with a project with Jamie Oliver about 4 years ago. And at that time, I was almost actively looking for some different kind of work, not just my private clients, but I wanted to find something where I could give back. I happened to have a fantastic conversation with one of the graduates. He'd been an apprentice and then he'd gone through the programme and graduated, and he'd been working in restaurants for a couple of years. And his story was so inspirational. He was very open about the fact that he'd come from a gang background.
Because the whole project took 15 very unlikely young people with quite awful backgrounds, some of them.
Very difficult.
Very deprived, certainly.
Yes, totally.
And Jamie Oliver gave them the chance to become
through the magic of
apprentices.
food.
Yeah.
Through the magic of food. And so I had a long chat with this graduate, and I was so inspired by his story. I thought, gosh, with what I do, I think there's a real synergy there and I could really help these guys. So I worked with the team, and that's how it happened. And I've worked with them now for about 4 years, and it's an absolute honour and a privilege to work with these young people.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when you're in the media, you get the chance very often to meet people who've made a fantastic success of their lives. And these very, very successful people very often have that one common factor, is that they absolutely believe they can do it.
Totally.
They can't see any reason why they shouldn't be successful. Yeah. They absolutely believe in themselves to a certain extent, and they go for it.
There's something called Orr's law, which says whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're probably right.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I like that.
Yeah.
So if you believe you can, you're probably right.
Totally.
If you believe you can't, equally,
totally,
you're probably right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the bottom answer to that is you should really try and believe you can.
Yes,
if you can.
Totally.
Because then you've got a much better chance. We'll talk more in just a couple of moments. 26 minutes past 12. My guest is Fiona Nicolson, who's a hypnotherapist from Henley, works with, what did you say, cognitive hypnotherapy particularly?
Yes.
I know you work particularly on anxiety.
I do.
And I know how crippling anxiety can be. There's a member of my family for whom it is as crippling as having both her legs broken.
Yes.
She won't go out. I can't believe how, and she knows it's unreasonable, this over-anxiety, but can't seem to do anything about it.
Yes.
So you're finding that more and more of us are suffering from this sort of anxiety?
Yes, I think within the modern setting, the modern context, the world we live in, we can become even more anxious than we used to be because of all the pressures that are on us to achieve, to do this, to do that. And it can manifest for many people as a state of anxiety.
But obviously there are some realistic anxieties. There's some real reasons to be anxious.
Yes.
But there are others that aren't. How do you combat either?
I think it's important to define, say, for example, the difference between anxiety and stress. Stress is a natural response to very specific situations. So we can feel stressed because we've got money issues, because of a relationship, things like that. So we understand why we're feeling like that, and because we understand that, it becomes easier to deal with. It also has a time frame. We know it'll change when circumstances change. Anxiety is different from stress because we almost don't know what's causing it. It's non-specific. We can feel it. We don't know what's tripping it. And many of my clients say, my God, I think I'm going mad because I have this anxiety. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I don't know what to do about it.
Well, how do you get to the cause of that? Is that where the hypnotherapy comes in?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And do people really say things under hypnosis? When you talk, it's too much to talk about here. When you talk about hypnosis, do you mean like we all think the dangly object and then we go to sleep and start talking?
No, it doesn't.
It's not like that, right?
I'm so sorry. It doesn't work like that. I say to clients, there's no swinging watches or anything like that.
Shame.
I
Okay.
think, again, it's interesting to remember that actually when we start talking about our problem pattern, when clients sit in front of me and start talking about the issues that's going on for them in their lives, they actually go into trance. So somebody will go into an anxiety trance. They become so focused on what's happening that the rest of the world seems to disappear. So actually what I'm trying to do is actually get people out of their problem pattern trance. I use in many cases a trance state to get them out of that scenario. I use a variety of other tools.
Yeah,
as well.
I imagine you tailor it differently.
Totally. I use different
person
techniques
sitting in
for
front of
different
you.
clients for different reasons.
Do
Yeah.
people come to you privately, or do companies, or do you get referred
I
by
do
GPs?
both.
Or what?
I do a bit of everything. So I have private clients that will contact me through referrals, friends that have seen me or they've found me in the media or something like that. I also work as part of multidisciplinary teams with specific consultants who specialise in medical issues, and I work and support on the psychological aspects, because as we were actually talking before in the break, the huge connection between the mind and the body and the impact of one on the other. And then I also work with business leaders, and often then they will use my services and I will work with key directors within their business. So my clients come from a wide variety of different means.
Do you tend to see, I mean, it's probably silly to ask if all humans follow certain patterns, but you say you work with a lot of business leaders.
Yes.
The successful ones, do they have a typical mindset? Are they all a bit like each other?
It's not that it's typical. It can be that there are certain common things that motivate business people in general terms, as we were mentioning earlier. Things like a fear of failure if it's at the right level, it can be highly motivating. When that fear is too great, it becomes paralysing. People can't make decisions, they can't move forward, they can't think in the way that they need to think in order to make a successful business. So it's about harnessing these fears and getting them into a place that's actually motivational, is useful for that person.
I was listening to a conversation about this very subject on the radio this morning.
Yes.
That we tend, or our medicine, our attitudes, up until now probably, have always treated the mental as different from the physical.
Yes.
Our physical sciences, our physical medicine has come on leaps and bounds over the last 100 years or so.
Yes.
And we go to the doctor and they'll write a prescription and hopefully that will cure it. The mental side of things, we're only just beginning to address. I mean, teachers are just beginning to look upon happiness as being actually rather important.
Exactly.
We haven't spoken like that for a long time.
No.
Do you think we are now coming into an era where we're beginning to treat the mental and the emotional as importantly as the physical?
Yes, I think we are. I think it's coming back again, and I think that's terribly important because, as we said before, the mind-body connection is so strong, and many of the clients I see with physical issues, there is a huge psychological element, part of it, that once we work with that, we change that, it really, from a twofold point of view, it changes how they perceive their medical issue, but actually changes the medical issue as well.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yes, fascinating.
Because I was hearing that it was a cancer specialist who was saying and they deal a lot in testing with placebo subjects, and very often if somebody's on a placebo and they believe they're on the real drug, they'll do better if they actually believe they are on the real drug.
I think when they're testing drugs, and I mean I'm not an expert in this at all, but just from there's a vague memory that drugs that they put into the market only have to be a small percentage more effective than the placebo in order for them to be marketed and go onto the market. It's incredible. I can't remember the stats, but there's something.
That's a sign of how strong
Totally.
the mind
You're
is.
absolutely
And this person
right.
was also saying, if you believe it, in the olden days when we used to believe our doctors were absolute gods, if you had absolute faith in your doctor, you're more likely to recover and do well physically if you really have faith in your doctor. And that's something we need to address as well, because nowadays as a society, we tend to be very sceptical about our doctors.
We are, yes. And I think as a therapist, it's about harnessing that in as much as we read our clients, we get all the signals from them, we understand our clients using a variety of different techniques, and we change and modify how we respond to them in order to create that, we call it therapeutic rapport. And it's exactly the same as it used to be with doctors, but we try actively to harness this in order to enhance the therapeutic process.
What a fascinating business you're in.
I know I am.
Thank
I'm
you
very
so much.
lucky.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and giving us a glimpse into what you're
very
doing.
welcome. It's been a
and
pleasure.
who knows, in the next 50 years or so, we may be able, it'd be great, wouldn't it, if we could have the same sort of drive in trying to get somewhere dealing with the mind issue as we have done over the last 100 or so years with the body side of things. Thanks very much, Fi.
Thank you, Anne.